Hey guys, so thanks so much for coming out here this morning. So we here today are really excited to be with you. I'll point out that we are the only panel that is exclusively made up of people who don't wear suits. And that's just because we're very, very focused on working within our entrepreneurial ecosystem, and a lot of us just don't own suits. So the other note I want to make is I'm really, really bummed that my friend Pat Riley couldn't make it out here today. He unfortunately is pretty ill, but we've got really an all-star cast of people. And so rather than spending a bunch of time, kind of each of us giving a speech about ourselves, we figured we'd kind of get really deep into the conversation today. So is everyone all mic'd up and ready to go?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Awesome. So this all-star cast that I was talking about is made up of 3 really great people. We've got, oh, thank you. We've got Daniel Epstein from the Unreasonable Institute. What Daniel's doing is he's actually built this kind of group of companies. It's the Unreasonable Group. Yeah. And he's really focused on trying to solve some very important social problems, social and environmental, and a ton of other problems as well. He is on a bunch of under 30 lists. He's in the Inc. magazine list and a few others. And the funny thing is when we were looking for him last night, we couldn't find him because Todd and I were joking about how we've only seen pictures of him with his dog. And so in true to form, when we talked this morning, the first thing he showed me was on his unlock screen on his phone. He has a picture of his dog. We've got Todd from Rocket Space, which is a really, really interesting group for this conversation just because, in the past 21 months, not only have they produced a bunch of hits, so if you've used Uber to kind of, get a car before, or, you've ever, done something with Zarly or Domo, that all came out of Rocket Space. But they've really gone through the whole evolution from co-working space to seed accelerator, and now they're doing some really interesting stuff with corporates as well. So we've got Todd here as well. And then last we have Scott Bailey. Scott's from actually the largest of the seed accelerators. So they have 125 companies go through Mass Challenge. And so he's got a lot of great insights as well. And then I'm here kind of to help with the conversation a little bit. I'm a director at DFJ Mercury, so we're an investor in Seed Accelerator. So we're investors in Techstars and Surge and Accelerate Labs in Chicago. And that's really driven by the fact that we invest in a lot of the companies that come out of these seed accelerators. So if you look at our portfolio, almost all of them either come out of universities on the life sciences side, from professors and graduate students, or on the IT side. They tend to come out of seed accelerators or incubators and stuff like that. And this is all driven by the fact that our fund is very focused on seed investing and being the first institutional capital into companies. So that's why we're huge fans of everything they're doing. Now, we figured that maybe some of you guys would be a little confused if we started immediately talking about co-working spaces versus accelerators versus incubators. And because Rocket Space has kind of crossed a lot of these lines over its evolution, we thought it'd be good to get Todd to just kind of give us a quick primer and allow everyone else to chime in.
Sure. So we started 21 months ago, and I think sort of the quick story of Rocket Space really sort of helps explain what's co-working, incubator, accelerator. I mean, incubators and the models have been around since the 50s and 60s. Then governments got involved, and then incubators got to be known as incinerators, and so no one wants to be associated as an incubator, but now everyone calls themselves accelerator. So the terms are used all across. But when we started, we were co-working for funded technology companies. And what we saw is we had this great group of technology companies, and we realized we needed to be doing more. So what we've done is we've evolved our business from working from co-working, which is really just about providing flexibility around space. And for those who were here yesterday, you heard the panel on co-working, to where what incubators and accelerators are doing is really providing a strategic value and helping them through. And so with seed stage accelerators, it's really about helping them around concept to market. Where we sit in Rocket Space, what our sweet spot is seed to B. It's about growth, scale, and traction. And so you're really seeing sort of an evolution and growth along the whole spectrum.
Now, all of us here are really focused on solving very specific types of problems. It's not like we're all competing against each other to kind of find the same companies. And so I thought it would be good for us to talk about the underlying problems that we're trying to solve within this ecosystem. So it'd be great if Daniel will start off and we can kind of go down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Our entrepreneurs, the common thread throughout all of them is the problem sets they're trying to solve. We talk about trying to solve problems that you would want to be your life's work. So some of the most intractable social and environmental challenges really of this century. We have entrepreneurs leveraging for-profit models to try to prevent the act of honor killing in rural Pakistan, or ultra-affordable DNA diagnostic devices in Argentina, or they may be using a nanotechnology to transform carbon emissions into a material for spaceships that's actually profitable in Singapore. Whatever it might be, we're helping our entrepreneurs try to break through a glass ceiling that exists for most entrepreneurs in emerging markets, which is how do you scale an effective technology that is actually addressing a social environmental need internationally? How do you really move that technology transnationally? And so we've done a lot of things along those lines. One is we run the Unreasonable Institute in Boulder, Colorado. We bring out about 25 entrepreneurs from about 20 countries each summer for 6 weeks, match them with roughly 60 mentors and about 100 investors, and they all live together in the same house over the course of 6 weeks. Our goal is to accelerate serendipity, connections, investment, mentorship. Then the second program we just launched is called Unreasonable at Sea. That is an accelerator for 11 companies on a ship as we circumnavigate the southern hemisphere. We'll be sailing about 25,000 nautical miles, porting in 13 countries. And we figured there's no better way to experiment in transnational entrepreneurship than just to go to market. So we're playing with a couple different models. Our fundamental belief is that entrepreneurship is the answer to most all of the issues we face today. And we've kind of dedicated ourselves towards helping entrepreneurs who are solving those really significant problems.
So our focus, as I sort of mentioned, is a bit later stage, right? Because it's seed to B. So where we work is with young technology companies. And again, it's about growth, scale, and traction. And ultimately, no matter what business you're in, if you're going to grow and scale a company, fundamentally you need three things. You need cash to invest in your business. You need an incredible team. And you need customers and users. So what we do is we've built the perfect ecosystem around companies of this size and stage, and help them with just not those basic elements, but it's about peer mentorship. It's about bringing in mentors and events and access to capital and working with folks like DFJ to ultimately to really helping them build traction, which again is about customers and users. And one of the ways we do that is by introducing young technology companies to big established brands. And I'll give an example of that. We work with a lot of brands from Microsoft to British Airways, to Sony, to AB InBev, to Pearson Media, and the list goes on. But a great example is we have a company in Rocket Space called Quarter. They're a second screen experience for watching sports. So you're watching a baseball game, you're watching a football game, you can pull up your iPad, and now you can engage with other people that are watching that same game. There's a gamification layer, and you can talk trash between folks as well. Average engagement time is roughly 57 minutes per session. So we introduced them to ESPN, Turner Media, and AB InBev. AB InBev is going to run a pilot with them for the Super Bowl, branded on their app, which will roughly give them around 2 million active users. That's game-changing for a young company. And so by leveraging those relationships in an effective way, you can really help these young companies grow and scale, hopefully faster and with higher quality.
I want to riff on a couple of things that were said. Actually, one, when we first came to Impact, there was like a slide that showed like the ecosystem. I love that slide. Literally, that's part of like one of my decks. But I think it really describes what I think a lot of us are trying to achieve, which is like look at the startup problem as a system-wide problem, not just individual pieces that are not really talking to one another. And so when you look at it, really like I actually think it's kind of the core of why we started Mass Challenge, which is like if you look at 2009. We started in 2010, but in 2009, the Dow was below 7,000. There was talk of the next Great Depression and 10 years of stagnation. And like what we realized was it was because there was too much of a focus on taking value and essentially greed, right? And not enough of a focus on value creation. And so the people that are actually creating value are actually in their parents' basement eating ramen noodles with no access to the resources that they need. And so one of the key things that it sounds like we're all talking about is being able to help connect them to what they actually need in order to be successful. Strategic partners, investors, other people, a lot of you in the room, right, probably want to partner with other early stage companies as they grow and scale because they can do a lot of big things. And so, I don't know, I think it's pretty important to see that it's important to get the startups out of their basement. And I think like one of the things that I like about Mass Challenge is like we're literally a platform to help get them out in exposure and then connect them to the resources. And we give away $1 million, which is helpful. But you know, one of the things is getting startups access to what they need in like a faster time than they could ever really imagine. I think that's what all of our programs do a really good job of. So.
Yeah, this is all music to my ears. So part of the reason why, you know, as a venture capitalist, I'm super involved with accelerators, and I invest in accelerators, is because, you know, when I think about the companies I want to invest in, I think about them from 3 different risk profiles point of view. I think about them from a technical risk point of view, I think of them from a marketing risk point of view, and an execution risk point of view. And what I love about these accelerators, and we heard pieces of this as they talked about, is they try their best to take those elements of risk off the table before I invest in the company. So whether it's helping them find their initial customers, or helping them get their first pilots off the ground, or giving them that coaching to tell them how to manage themselves properly, you see a substantial reduce in those 3 risk categories before they even approach VCs, which is huge for us because it makes it much more likely that we can invest in these companies and we can see the growth that we have to provide to the pension programs that invest in us. So it's a big win for us as well, and so we're huge fans of these programs. Now, there are a lot of interesting people in this audience today who are either coming from a government point of view, a university point of view, or other members of the ecosystem. And a lot of you are probably wondering, you know, how should you be engaging with these accelerators? And so I thought it'd be interesting to have our panel kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I could maybe kick it off. So on like the university perspective, our program has typically been really successful. A lot of, some universities actually sponsor our program locally in Boston, like Babson, WPI, Northeastern, stuff like that. But actually what's really valuable is the ability to, one, be supportive of students in universities, because those students, as they graduate and go through, end up applying to Mass Challenge and potentially becoming part of the finalist pool. But we're also supported by foundations like the Deshpande Foundation, the Blackstone Charitable Foundation, and a lot of what I think their support helps with is adding legitimacy to programs. Like when we first started, we didn't have a name, no one knew who we were. And for us, one of the most important things was having partners that were like willing to stand behind and say, like, we support this, this is really important. And as you look at your organizations and things like that, think about joining up with other early stage organizations or startups and people like that to get support. I think that's one thing. And then also, I always say collaborate. It's like the most important part of what you do. Don't try and, as I mentioned before, hoard the pie. I always say, like, you should walk away from every conversation like offering help or generosity, because being collaborative is actually, I think, what all of us use in order to be really successful, and that would be my other piece of advice.
So I was at Harvard earlier this week speaking and talking to students there, but ultimately how I work with universities is I represent over 250 companies that are all hiring. They're all looking for high caliber talent. And now, mind you, 85% of that talent are engineers. I can place a Ruby engineers, a Rails engineers, iOS, PHP, Java, whatever it is, any day of the week. And so it's working, you know, if you represent universities or cities, it's working to sort of to train folks with those skill sets, because that's where the jobs are going. But yeah, so I am searching for top talent from everywhere, because I have a bunch of companies that are all hiring and growing very, very quickly.
Can I throw in one more? I totally forgot to mention this. Actually, we have a lot of international applications, although we're called Mass Challenge. People always think we're just Massachusetts focused. We actually have, we had over 1,200 applications this year from 35 different countries, and better visas would make it so much easier for us to get teams over. Like I had 3 teams from Russia this year. We had teams from Israel, Africa, like literally all over the world. And one of the hardest parts is getting them into the competition itself, and having them be able to like show up for the Accelerator program, because like visas are so hard to get and it's expensive and time consuming. So whoever's here that wants to talk about that, I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah, we probably have 2 to 3 visa issues a week at Rocket Space with our companies.
Yeah, totally. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and just the ability to get, there's all this incredible talent, and they have, and a lot of them like went to school at Stanford or at Berkeley and want to start a company, and they can't stay in the country. It's a real shame.
Totally agree with the visa challenge. We have to get 27 entrepreneurs' visas into 13 countries in the next 2 months. So it's kind of absurd. But I agree with that challenge wholeheartedly. I agree. We say we believe in pathological collaboration. So totally I agree with the energy you're putting out there in terms of collaboration. We have about 300 partners right now. With operations in over 100 countries. A lot of those are universities. We have about 60 university partners. And the opportunities really range between how we can collaborate. It could be loose affiliations or Unreasonable at Sea. We're actually launching with MIT's Media Lab and Stanford's D School as a closer partnership there. We are working with a number of government agencies here in the US and abroad. I know this is very, this is broad in terms of how we can collaborate, but there's a lot of avenues to push forward because this is an ecosystem play. So if you're excited about the problems we're trying to solve, I'd love just to meet, sit down, and brainstorm, whether you're a fund, a foundation, a family office, a university, a consulting firm. If you know engineers, I couldn't agree more. We're always looking for engineers for our companies as well.
Yeah, the last thing that I'd kind of highlight is, if you're a government agency or if you're a corporate, working with a startup is something that tends to be a little bit challenging. And it's something that I really, really wish the procurement systems would be a lot easier around. So I don't know how many times I've run into a situation where I've had a startup that has the perfect solution for a very large enterprise, but purely because of the challenges with procurement, it's just been delayed by like 9 to 12 months. And that's, I really, really wish there was a way where below certain dollar thresholds amount, you could have streamlined procurement of services from startups, because startups are struggling literally month in, month out for cash flow purposes. And so waiting like a year for a check to come in is a really big deal for them.
even insurance requirements and things like that.
Yeah,
it's just
for sure.
Brutal. Yeah.
But some of the things that we're seeing sort of evolve is we work with a fair amount of brands is sort of the evolution of a chief innovation officer, as you sort of heard on the panel yesterday. So a lot of established companies are really sort of forming these, if it's the EIR role or the chief innovation officer, which is really out there looking and trying to source and understand new technology. So we work with them on a regular basis, and we're finding it's a great sort of entry point to really bring new and emerging technology, because the large corporations, as you hear, have to be innovative, or else you're going to end up like Borders. Who in 2001 gave their online business to Amazon because they thought it was not strategic. Whoops.
Yeah, very cool. Now this is a space that, for all practical purposes, did not exist before 2006. We've now got accelerators in a lot of places. They're starting up everywhere. What do you guys see as the biggest challenge that you're going to run into now, over the next, few months and few years in terms of, what you're working on, what you're focusing on, and the startups you're trying to attract?
Who wants to start?
Yeah, I can take that. The biggest challenge, I think there's a lot of challenges with working so internationally. One of the reasons we're doing Unreasonable at Sea is we see this as one of the most radical experiments in global entrepreneurship, and that we're actually bridging all of these different markets in a short period of time. I think the challenges that come along with that are massive, but they're also decently unforeseen. We do struggle with financing. Trying to fund a company in the Congo is difficult because liquidity events aren't likely. So I always find it very interesting that entrepreneurship, which in its DNA and its blood is based on disruption and innovation, when you look at the tool that funds it, venture capital, we're using pretty much the same technology we used 60 years ago, the same types of term sheets. For our entrepreneurs, we need to get really creative about how we fund their companies. And they are raising money. They're raising Series A, Series B, but they're doing it with quasi-equity schemes, with royalty financing, with factoring, more complicated, more creative financing structures, and that space is still very nascent. So there's a lot of exploration to be had there. If anybody wants to talk about that, I'd love to. If anybody has answers to that, that'd be great too. But
I actually don't see as many, I mean, there are always going to be challenges, but I actually see amazing opportunity. That's like, I just think more people are looking at startups. There's more focus and interest from other partners to be supporting that, and honestly, I'm really excited. I think this is literally our stated mission is like startup renaissance, and I actually think that's pretty interesting. It's very Massachusetts for us to call us that, but
you're such an entrepreneur, though. You're so optimistic.
Yeah, I actually was loving her speech before, Kay. Totally love optimism.
No, I would echo that. I mean, we're a startup of startups. We're 21 months old ourselves. And so our challenges are just keeping up. And I mean, we are very lucky and privileged where we get 3 to 5 applications a day for companies looking to move into rocket space. We really focus on quality, so we'll accept around 20% of them. But for us, we're continually trying to up the bar in everything we do on the companies that come in and the services that we provide for them. So for us, the challenge is just trying to keep up because things move incredibly quickly.
One other thing that I think is kind of interesting is we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but like the core to all of our programs is is mentorship, right? It's like kind of the bread and butter of what we do. And you know, I was talking to some other people yesterday about mentorship and how important it is. And sometimes I say, I mean, we run $1 million competition, right? But I would literally say it's the lie that we tell the world. We really do give away the money, but it's what we say in order to help attract all the resources that we need for the Accelerator program, whether it's good mentors, whether it's good judges. Through multiple rounds of judging, like teams come into the program, and it's actually like so important to have like quality mentors. But I think where the opportunity is like creating better systems to match them across like multiple communities, across multiple geographies, and that's like something I think is kind of an interesting opportunity because mentorship is needed everywhere. Like I myself like love having mentors because it adds like tons of leverage and other connections that are really, really helpful. And so however you can integrate mentorship into your programs, I think it's going to be widely valuable both to you and your supporters and things like that. So that's my thought.
Yeah, it's also awesome that a lot of those mentors end up being customers,
yeah.
which is huge for us. So very cool. So we just kind of quickly went through kind of a quick overview as to what our industry is about and you know what we're focused on, what our challenges are. We're super interested in kind of hearing what your questions are kind of in the audience today. And so I'd love to kind of get our, I'd love to kind of hear some feedback for you. While we're getting the logistics on that kind of settled out, there are a few kind of trends that we've been seeing, so let's knock out this one thing and then we'll go to the questions from the audience. So I'd love to kind of hear from you, like what are the biggest trends that you're seeing amongst accelerators? Like I hear a lot about, vertical focus. I hear a lot about kind of focusing on other geographies. What are the things that kind of make you excited today about this industry?
Yeah, you just took the two. I was going to say, which is there's certainly becoming focused accelerators and incubators who say we're going to tackle healthcare. We want technologies that are disrupting education in US markets, or we're working with entrepreneurs strictly in India with mobile applications. I think that's a big trend, and for a good reason, which is if you focus your program, then you can focus your mentors, you can focus the capital partners, the venture capitalists that you provide or that you partner with. So it makes a lot of sense. It's a logical next step, but there's a huge trend in that direction, and that means that thousands of accelerators are starting to pop up because they're just starting to focus on different niches.
I would absolutely agree with that. The only thing I would add is sort of that there's an evolution that's happening too where how people are taking equity or not taking equity or investing or not investing, but still offering this great sort of support network. So since we evolved out of co-working, our sort of model is slightly different where we don't require equity at point of entry, we don't require investment at point of entry. So it's risk-free from the entrepreneur's perspective. But we do invest if we get invited in sort of on the back end. So when they then go to raise their A round or B round, and we get invited in because we earned our right in, because we actually showed true value, which I love the concept of actually having to show value and then getting invited in. And then if we also then choose it's a good investment, then we will invest. Right now, we just invest off our balance sheet. Ultimately, we will have a sidecar fund. And the interesting thing about sort of how that's sort of evolving is the interest for that sidecar fund is actually the LPs, many of them will most likely be the corporate brands that we work with. So it's an interesting model as you're seeing, from the YCs, the 500s, the Techstars to what you guys are doing. Everyone, a slightly different take on it to rock health and in the healthcare space.
Okay, for the purposes of this audience, can you define sidecar fund?
So for us, it's a co-investment fund, so we are not going to lead around. We work very closely within the venture community, so it's strictly about co-investment. So while DFJ, Andreessen Horowitz, others will lead a round, we will strictly just co-invest in that round.
That's something we're looking at as well. We don't take any equity and there's no restrictions in our program. And so hopefully someone hits it really big and donates back to Mass Challenge. But I think one of the things that, wishful thinking, but I mean, I think something will happen. But one of the things that I think is interesting is this idea of this kind of sidecar fund. It's something that we've been talking about. I think also there's a lot of other regions outside of the US that are looking to replicate some of the things that we're doing. And so geographic expansion is hard and expensive and time consuming. But I think there are some opportunities. I think we're looking to invest in our technology. And I think make it easier for accelerators to run or like connect with mentors. I kind of mentioned that before. And I think there's some exciting things that we're looking at doing there. But I think there's a lot of interesting things going on. But those are a couple of the ones that I think are important.
Hi, Connie Loden with the Economic Development Corporation in Manitowoc County in Wisconsin. And we're working, I work with a regional economic development corporation as well, that we're working on an accelerator mentorship program. And one of the things that we were looking at, to your point about matching mentorship and how to go about that, and that not one mentor necessarily has all of the skills and expertise to help that business. We were kind of considering and looking at models on curriculum that there might be for mentorship that the initial or say lead mentor can kind of walk through, and as they get to certain sections or certain elements in that curriculum, if it's not necessarily their expertise, who you bring in for those other parts of that curriculum. Do any of you have anything kind of on that order or something that would assist in that type of matching for the mentorship?
Yeah, I can, our program, we basically run exactly like that. Like, we're an 8-person team with 125 companies, each with a minimum of 3 mentors. It's like insane, so I can't actually do any of the mentoring. But what we have gotten good at is the model of like helping identify key mentors. It's kind of an opt-in process. We do like literally like, there's an element of online stuff. It's kind of like eHarmony for mentors, right? And then what we do at the beginning of the program, like the first month is all about like mentor speed dating and stuff like that. We literally do like one-on-one, we ring a gong, you have to go to the next person. And so there's an element that I think always will take place offline and have to be kind of handheld. During the summer, you have one lead mentor, and then you have as many mentors as you want, because typically, there's 10 things that's going to make you really, really successful. Let's say it takes 10 things to make you really successful as an entrepreneur. I say it takes a village to make a startup, and so you want to fill your village with all the people that will help make it really successful. So someone in marketing, someone who can help you hire people, a lawyer that can do your corporate work, or IP and things like that. And like really you need everyone. Right? You need maybe a celebrity to endorse you. You need a corporate brand as a customer, right? And it's all of these things that are really important. And so inevitably they're going to need all of that. But the key is like if you can identify mentors up front that have access to those networks and those things, that's like a pretty crucial part. But I have some stuff I can send you afterwards, so remind me. Okay.
Yeah, we have some pretty kind of radical theories, I think, on mentorship. We believe that the most productive collisions in terms of relationships happen on the fringes of structure. So we've tried a lot of systems, and we haven't found anything that worked in terms of matchmaking. We think that it needs to be a very organic process. And so bringing everybody together, especially if it's a local program, you have the luxury of really being able to do that. For us, our mentors spend a minimum of 3 nights living in the same house with all of our companies, and over time, they then really begin to gravitate towards the companies that they're most excited about. We do some preliminary matchmaking. We say, hey, we think these 5 companies are going to get you really excited just from the relationships we have with the mentors, but a lot of times it's a big surprise. And for us, mentorship's really serious. It's a minimum of a 2-year commitment. Ideally, that's either as a board member, investor, or sometimes mentors become employees, actually, of the companies as well in some unusual circumstances. But it's a big commitment, and so we want to make certain that that relationship is really the right one, and we haven't found a way to really develop the system to create that yet.
About 2 years ago, when I was at the Kauffman Fellows Program, I paired up with Professor Yale Hochberg at Northwestern University, and we tried really, really hard to see if there was a linkage between the mentorship system that was being used, coupled with the curriculum that an accelerator was used, and try to see if there was a correlation between that and the ability for companies going through accelerators to get funded. And what we quickly figured out was there was no correlation at all, other than the fact that a mentorship program existed of some kind. So just kind of keep in mind that the fact that you're thinking about the problem is probably more indicative of your success than whatever specific system you end up using.
Yes, this is Kay Koplovitz. I'd like to know, you're doing great programs. I'd be curious as to know how many women are in each of your programs? And then I have a question I want to ask you.
I was actually going to come up to you afterwards. We're just getting surveys back. Since we don't take equity, we survey heavily. That's what I always say. But last year, over 40% of the teams had at least one female co-founder at Mass Challenge, out of the 125 teams that participated. So representative of roughly about 150 or so women out of about almost a little less than 200. So
that's remarkable. It's less at Rocket Space. I'd say it's probably 15, 20%. It's just a gut feel.
Yeah, we had about 40% of our participants, entrepreneurs, were women, so women-led companies. Last year, though, that went down to about 30%. For Unreasonable at Sea, though, in terms of the teams, 9 out of 11 of them have women at executive leadership.
Yeah. And then I don't know if this is a good stat or not, but I mean, if you look at the accelerators that we have funded, a lot of them are led by women. So Techstars Boulder is led by Nicole Glaros. Tech Wildcatters down in Dallas is led by Gabriella Draney. Techstars Boston, I believe, is
Rock Health
with Katie Ray, Rock Health. And
yeah,
there's a lot of women who play very prominent roles in this industry.
Well, I just asked the question because I think there is an improving number of women to be attracted into these programs, and I just wanted to find out if there were any proactive ways you were recruiting more women into it, because we at Springboard have put, 503 companies out to market. We've brought them to market, or 12 years out of 5,000 that we looked at. There are a lot of women out there, is my point, that are totally fundable and building scalable businesses. And we're trying to, with the very young ones that we see that are not ready for Springboard yet, because that's A round, B round investment, we try to encourage them to go into the program so that they learn some of the skills they're missing. So if there's anything we can do to help you find more really promising women entrepreneurs, we certainly are there for you. SpringboardEnterprises.org.
Yeah, would absolutely love it. I mean, we are reflective of what's inbound as we do zero marketing. And so it's just, for us, it's just reflective of sort of what walks in the door.
The other one is having, it actually like totally changes the dynamic of an office. Having I'm pretty nerdy. I was joking with some people about this last night. But it's pretty game-changing to just have very smart, capable, very driven women in the room to mix it up, and it literally changed the way Mass Challenge operated. Our first year we had less women involved, but we actively reached out to programs. We worked with Springboard, we worked with Golden Seeds, we worked with some other programs very focused on it, and so we had much better environment in the office, and it literally changed dramatically how the office operated. And it was positive. Also, they were doing really well. One of our companies called Her Campus is the #1 online magazine for college women. There are over 300 colleges and universities, and they have 20 interns in the office, and it's pretty amazing to just see how it changes things, and it's great. I send people to Mass Challenge anytime. Good.
Good morning. Imad Rahim, Colorado Technical University. You mentioned working with a lot of social entrepreneurs from the Unreasonable Institute, teams from other countries. Now, one of the difficulties in third world country is technology. And so much of your information is online. So how does these teams get access to you and your information and your resources?
Yeah, that's great. I'll take the first stab. So that's where our few hundred partners operate in over 100 countries. They're pipelines into us, so they actively recruit kind of on the ground, tell their network, their entrepreneurs, hey, you should apply to this program. Here's how you do that. Because of that, we've worked with 4 former child soldiers as entrepreneurs. This past summer, we had an entrepreneur who's a refugee for 14 years of his life. So it's a very eclectic group, and it's all about partnership, and that's why we're so pathologically collaborative. We need on-the-ground partners in these places to be able to reach those entrepreneurs. That said, it's not good enough, not even close to being good enough. You know, if we work with 25 entrepreneurs a year, that's nothing. So for us, we're looking to scale up the Institute. We have pretty audacious hopes there. We're looking to move to 100 institutes in 100 countries by 2020, and we're setting the foundation for that. That means that they're all hyper-local, and that they're run by local leadership, which is critical. And then we're experimenting with online platforms and resources. But you're right, it's a huge challenge, and just putting it online is not enough. So we're still learning a ton in that regard.
Same here. Basically, everything is word of mouth. We've had 0 budget to date because we just hadn't had the funding. And you know, one of the things that I think is having like strong set of supporters. And I mentioned we survey heavily, but like one of the key metrics that we use to determine whether or not we're actually providing value to the startups is we use the Net Promoter Score. And literally, we rank higher with our startups than Apple customers rank Apple Computer, right? And that literally means they're evangelical about what we do, which means that they're going to go out and say that they really enjoyed the program and that they'll go tell their friends, and that is like a key thing for us. And as long like we sometimes joke in the office, we want to be like the Ritz-Carlton of support for startups. Like literally, if someone asks me for something with the printer, like we get up and walk them. Like that is, our kind of model is predicated on the idea that like we will do anything for the startup, and that adds a lot of value when they leave the program and they go back to their respective countries or towns, and they'll talk about the program. And so word of mouth, I have to say, I've heard great things from. I know of several startups that have been through both other programs, and like it is literally like game changing to have people that can refer. Also, like I mentioned, one of the value, I know you work with brands too, but like having big corporate brands that can help like spread the word, or even like Verizon hopefully will buy ad space for like some of our companies, right? Or Microsoft is helping write blogs and get other press for our teams, and like all of that is kind of helpful as well. So as you look to get support for your organizations and things like that, totally like reach out to people. Get your partners to help spread the word, and it's crucial.
Yeah, part of the reason why I was so bummed that Pat couldn't make it today was because, so Pat is from the Global Accelerator Network. If you guys are not familiar with that, the Global Accelerator Network was born out of Techstars. And basically, David Cohen, having set up, these accelerators in San Antonio, Boulder, Seattle, Boston, and New York, was trying to figure out how he could scalably get Techstars up and running in as many corners of the planet as possible. And so the Global Accelerator Network is an initiative that Pat leads up, and it's really dedicated to taking those methodologies, taking those processes, taking that curriculum, and then just making it available. And so they have, and so I went with Pat earlier this year to Italy, where they had the first summit of all the global accelerators that are members of this thing. And I mean, you're talking about accelerators in Egypt, in Africa, in Europe, I mean, just everywhere. And they're being extremely evangelical about trying to spread that philosophy and spread, more importantly, their corporate structure documents and their guidebook on how to raise money for your accelerator and how to mentor and those sorts of things to as many corners as possible. So that's a little commercial for what Pat's trying to do at the Global Accelerator Network, but they're really working hard on that problem.
No, but the thing I would add there is at the end of the day, the product works. It's a product. I mean, we're all startups ourselves here, right? So at the end of the day, we're building products that people want to use. And so we haven't had the budget to do any marketing. right? So everything that we do is all word to mouth, but ultimately it's about showing and proving value, that building something that people want to use. And I give that advice every day to companies in rocket space. It's like ultimately, if, you know, product, and build something that people want to use, create demand. And in some sense, that's what we're all doing because we're all proving and showing value.
Hi, Amanda Britt with Panzanzi. We're a new social impact incubator in Chicago. And we've recently gotten a couple of requests from accelerators in town to help build out entrepreneurs and their concepts so that they're ready to apply. What are you seeing in your applicant pools that work, and what would you like to see more of?
So what's nice is like, I think what's nice is we actually take social impact teams and nonprofits. We're actually doing an additional $50K prize for social impact teams on top of the $1 million this year. With one of our partners, and one of the things that we typically look for during the first application, it's like 2 pages, super high level, but it's really like, what's your idea, and why should someone believe that it's going to take off, right? The second round is more when you pitch in person or over Skype, and so that's much more about, okay, does this person seem like they have you know, the capability to pull off the idea? Are they execution focused? What traction have they had to date? Do they seem like they understand the long-term like plan of what's got to happen in order to make this a really big company? And that's, you know, and then when you look at pre-final, which is actually on Monday for us, that's more about like what happened during the accelerator, what traction did they make? Did they make any good progress with their mentors, stuff like that? What milestones did they hit? And then final judging is very much like in front of like kind of like the billionaire CEO entrepreneur type, and that's all about really kind of the entrepreneur because they're trying to identify like, do you see similar qualities that you had when you were first starting your company? Are you answering the right questions? Do you know what the strategy looks like? Stuff like that. So high level, but very much about the entrepreneur. So that's my thing.
We're a bit different because we don't look at entrepreneurs, we look at young companies. And so what we look at is we view the world as ecosystems. So when I meet a company and they're looking to come into rocket space, what I'm looking at is how seasoned is the founding team? What does their network look like? Who are their advisors? Who are their current investors? What type of ecosystem are they bringing with them? And is it going to add value sort of to the greater whole? And if it's a founder, it's their first venture, it's just friends and family and they don't have an advisory board, they're not a fit for us. What we're really focusing about is people that are coming in that have spent the time to build out that network and ecosystem. So my advice back would be build out that network as fast as possible and really focus on sort of build it out broad, but also hone it in so when you have the people close to you that are really going to add value. So it's really about the power of a network and power of the ecosystem.
Just to make certain I understand your question properly, you're asking what's worked in our selection process well?
What are you seeing in applicants that's great? And what would you like to see more of that they're not doing yet for applications?
Great. So we really believe the best go-to-market strategy is to go-to-market. We don't work with ideas, is what I'm getting at. We want to see that at the bare minimum you run a pilot or prototype at a bare minimum. Ideally, you've generated some cash through the front door because that just means that you're really hustling and you're not waiting for anybody to say okay before you go out and actually go to market. So I would push entrepreneurs, people with ideas, to go actualize those ideas, test them in market, test their assumptions, and then apply to a program because they're going to get so much more traction out of that program if they know what they don't know. And typically, you only learn that from going into market.
Yeah, I would say that almost every accelerator would have a different answer to your question. And I think it's because they're modeling, they're going after different verticals and they're going after different stages of development and they're going after different things. So the brandery in Cincinnati, Ohio is going to be really focused on the target customer you're trying to address. Whereas Surge down in Houston is going to be super focused on which aspect of the energy ecosystem you're trying to attack and how capital intensive it's going to be. And so it's really unique from accelerator to accelerator to accelerator.
One thing I will say on a tactical point, like from a tactical point of view, work on your presentation. Don't have like a 30-point slide. Like I've seen like so many presentations just like get killed because the formatting was off. It's like a stupid thing, but even so much as like just having kind of basic a 10-deck slide that's really high level, just something super simple. Work on a pitch. Like we're very pitch heavy, at Mass Challenge, and you got to be pretty clear and concise. So like practice it's just one thing that I think is really important. But that's me. I don't know why.
Hi, this is Kurt Abel from Mercy College. I'm the director of Social Entrepreneurship Institute. You spoke today a lot about partnerships, mentoring. Could you speak a little bit to how you guys have been partnering with universities, being on advisory boards? We've recently created several institutes ranging from Strategic Consulting Institute, Entrepreneurship, Life Path Coaching, and even women's in leadership roles. So it'd be interesting just to know kind of how you guys have been partnering, in this ecosystem.
Sure. In one form, we will often, we do tons of tours for, like, we have hundreds of universities in Massachusetts, and literally I'm doing a tour almost a week just to kind of get people excited about what we do. But it could also just be going to speak and promote what we're doing, but also doing classes on just general entrepreneurship and things like that. I did a college tour this year, and I drove for like 5 states in 3 days or something like that, and just was talking to all these different universities. Lots of them end up applying through their business plan competitions, which is, I think, is probably our strongest connection to universities. And I'm always looking for people that run competitions. Like I offer, like, we have a $100 fee to apply, right? It's kind of more of a filter than it is anything else, but I often try and provide discounts or like free tickets to universities that have students that win their programs and all this other stuff. That's one thing that we do, but I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of along the same light. I mean, I think it's an evolving relationship, and we're still young and new in it, so we're still kind of figuring it out as we go. So the stuff that we're doing now is very basic and elementary, right? So we'll go there, we'll speak, we'll give tours, we'll have classes through, and a lot of it for us right now is just a recruiting relationship, and then we'll just do other stuff for the fun of it, really, because it's a lot of fun to meet students. The one exception is Stanford. They have an incubator program called StartX, which for us is a great feeder. So we'll get a fair amount of companies from StartX into rocket space. But again, we're really early. We're still just trying to figure it out and see how the relationship evolves.
Yeah, I would echo that. We're still figuring it out. We have a lot of university partners, but most of those are really loose affiliations, where they're what we call pipeline partners. So they're marketing across their network. Could be their alumni network as well, saying, hey, if you have a company at this stage trying to solve these types of problem sets, you should, maybe look at applying to Unreasonable. So there's a very easy relationship there. Oftentimes those become more strategic over time. So like with Unreasonable at Sea, working with the MIT Media Labs and Stanford's D School to really create the program. Obviously that's much more embedded, and then recruiting talent as well for the companies. But really figuring it out and trying to find better ways to leverage those relationships. So we'd love to brainstorm.
Yeah, I'll do one more. Also, like lab space, we have a lot of like healthcare, life science companies and things like that are need facilities. And what's really great is universities have that, and because of our close relationship, we're able to help get our companies access to some of those things and stuff like that. So that's really helpful. But.
Yeah, I've actually seen it be kind of a function of geography to a certain degree. So if you're in one of the hub cities for startups, you need to rely less on the universities to attract your talent, just because, like the whole world decided one morning that consumer web was going to be based out of Northern California. So you don't necessarily need to recruit people from Northern California to do consumer web deals. But, if you're Accelerate Labs in Chicago, I mean, it's no coincidence that one of the directors at Accelerate Labs is the entrepreneurship professor at Northwestern. So I think it's really a function of geography, and that's kind of what drives the linkage. And so what you see is in a lot of the non-hub cities, you see a very strong linkage with the local universities, because there you have to be much more evangelical about getting startups off the ground. Whereas as you get to places like New York, Boston, and Northern California, I mean, it's kind of part of the DNA.
I'm telling you, geography actually does have an impact. It's like being able to call someone up and go have lunch really quickly, or like luckily Boston's got some big brands like Microsoft and Verizon, so we've been able to get a lot of support from them, and it's beneficial when I can get a call and they're head of strategy wants to come in and meet with teams for an afternoon, and that morning, right? There's an impact of that, and I wish it was different, but there's also some reality to it as well. But
yeah, I mean, I was talking to somebody about this last night at the reception, but I mean, geography, it's crazy. In this day and age where anyone can telecommute anywhere, geography has just gotten more important for us. What I tell my companies is I have a three-pronged test in terms of where they're located. I say, look, if you're in a city that is not the principal home of your customers and is not, a source of talent for you and is not a part of the ecosystem of partners that you have to work with on a daily basis, you probably should move. And the reason is because there are so many frictions that prevent you from being successful that you want your physical location to knock one of those out. And so if you can get access to one of those three things, I think that's huge for what your company does.
I'm Fiona McCauley with Making Sense International. For those of you attracting international entrepreneurs, especially from emerging economies, especially from challenging places like the Congo, how are they hearing about you? And what are the pipelines that they're in that are preparing them to compete to actually get into your accelerator programs?
As I was mentioning earlier, the pipeline partnerships for us. So on the ground local partners, and those could be universities, those can be venture funds, they can be angel groups, they can be innovation hubs, they could be companies. They're out there recruiting locally, trying to send us and kind of fast track their most interesting entrepreneurs. In terms of how they're being set up for success, a lot of those programs dedicate themselves to doing that. There's the African Leadership Academy is a good example of a great partner. But the reality is sometimes we have to take pretty big bets, and we're willing to do that. A lot of our entrepreneurs have, some of them have 2 PhDs out of MIT, some of them have no formal education whatsoever. That doesn't matter to us. We don't look at any level of background in terms of education. We really look at what you're doing. And when your filter is what have you done and what is it that you believe you can accomplish, and do they have the team set in place and the traction and so on, that opens it up a little bit more. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
One of our founders, he was a Sloaney. He won the MIT 100K, but he also ran the Global Startup Workshop one year, and he made a ton of global contacts, which is basically where we sourced a lot of our early kind of connections to the international world. And so that's been one of our biggest resources. And then basically referrals from that, and people who know other international organizations understand all of a sudden that Mass Challenge is not just Massachusetts. We also do attract companies from all over the world, and that message has kind of gotten out a little bit. We also have partnered pretty closely. I mean, the governor supports what we do, and we bring through lots of delegations for the governor and the mayor and things like that, and that's also garnered a lot of support and interest, so that kind of stuff. I'd love to do more if you have ideas. The hard part is I think we're all we have very little time and resources and people, and so the hardest part is it's very difficult to manage so many relationships, and so I always want to try and find more, but I also need to figure out a better way to get the word out and let people know without me being the one person to talk about it. So.
And I think part of it is your intention grenade. What are you conveying to the world that it is? Why do you exist, and who are you serving? For us, we've been very vocal about being very international. We believe the issues we face are global, therefore the audience of entrepreneurs needs to be global. That kind of spreads. And you can get national press coverage in a lot of these countries pretty easily. If you say we're looking for your best young entrepreneurs across Ethiopia, you can identify ways to really get coverage in these markets. But it takes a ton of time, no question. Bandwidth, it becomes kind of scary. You stop sleeping and all this kind of stuff. So.
Hi. My name is Allison Osborne. I'm with the Young Entrepreneurs Academy. And I'm curious to understand how you track the impact of your various accelerator programs in terms of job creation or company creation or revenue generated that goes back into both local and global economies, things of that nature.
So it's a really good question. And the short answer is we're still figuring it out. So one mechanism that we do have access and visibility to, that's really what it boils down to, is how much visibility do we really have? Because a company will stay with us anywhere between 6, 7 months to 14, 15 months, right? And so we actually physically house the companies. So one mechanism that we look at is how much funding have they secured with us and then after us. And so we use that as a gauge. Looking at job growth and other factors, I would love to, I just don't have visibility a lot of times into the metrics. And even on the funding side, you know, a lot of times if we're not in the round, we don't know exactly how large of a round it is. So we use, you know, on average, it's a gut feel, it's about a round of funding closes a week in Rocket Space, and we've had 5 acquisitions so far this year of companies in Rocket Space. So at the highest level, those are the metrics that we use, but we want more. Absolutely. It's a challenge to actually get the data.
Yeah. Yeah, so when so about 2 years ago, when we tried to put together, you know, the Accelerator rankings with Northwestern University, we really struggled with this question, and so, you know, being a VC and coming from the point of view of saying, hey, you know, if the purpose of an accelerator, from my very stilted point of view, is to get funding from someone like me, then we came up with the metric saying, well, let's look at the proportion of entrepreneurs that go through these programs and what proportion of them can actually walk out with an institutional funding round. So that was the answer we came up with, but that's a very VC-centric point of view to look at the problem. And it's also very entrepreneur-centric from the standpoint that we were looking at the proportion of them that were able to get the funding. So that was a way that we looked at it. And part of the problem is when we try to look at other metrics, when we try to look at like employment within a region, or we try to look at like post-money valuations, which one accelerator sent me 68 emails about saying that was the right way to measure it. You know, it's it gets very dicey to kind of do that just from our point of view, because it's really hard to measure. The results are pretty ambiguous, and you know it's hard to kind of compare apples to apples that way. I'm actually super interested in hearing how you guys measure.
So I mentioned before, like the Net Promoter Score is inevitably the one thing I truly care about. Like as long as the startups are happy and are satisfied and feel like that they're getting value in the program, that's really what I care about. Like our other 2 metrics are probably on jobs, and over the past 2 years we've had over roughly 230 teams go through the program, and they've now currently employ over 2,200 people. We also do it based on funding. So in the past 2 years, the teams raised on average about $1.1 million, and in aggregate have raised over $260 million. And this year, we're just getting metrics back on the class, but they've already are on even a kind of larger scale of investment than the past 2 classes. So we're pretty excited. We've had a couple of also acquisitions, but a lot of our teams are pretty early in that, so even that isn't I'd say as relevant metric for us, but we've had 5 teams acquired in the past year and a half. But yeah, that's kind of what we use. So
we have a little bit different tracking too. We do biannually. We send out surveys. We get a lot of data. We look at 6 metrics: growth or decline in revenue, profits, customer acquisition, team size, financing, and geographical expansion. We think as you track those 6 metrics, you can really get a good feel for the health of a company and how fast it's growing. We also have 2, though, very uncommon metrics. One is along the evangelist perspective, but how many of, this sounds crazy, how many of our entrepreneurs have tattoos of our logo on their body for the rest of their lives? And it's very real, it's very true. 3 weeks into the first institute, 2 of our entrepreneurs had gotten a tattoo and had no idea.
How many tattoos are there out there of your logo?
We're not doing a great job of tracking it. So Tyler thinks we have over 20 now.
So here's a challenge. Can we up it by 2 by the end of the day?
I'll show you mine. This is not appropriate.
That'd be awesome. So that also, we don't require equity to participate in the program, but at the end of our program, we sit down with the entrepreneurs and we say, hey, you know, if you're wildly successful in 5 to 10 years, you attribute that success to Unreasonable, you'd probably donate back to us. And we tell them that we wouldn't accept their funding. We don't think it's interesting enough, and that instead, if they really believe this was pivotal, we'd love for them to have the ability to give back today, and we'd love to be invested in their success today. So here's a contract, you can donate equity to the Institute. We tell them, can't make that decision. while we're together, go back to your home countries, make certain your shareholders are going to want to give away free equity after the program. And it's been really incredible. Over 90% of all the for-profit companies who we've worked with have pledged to give us equity as well. So we track those two metrics as indicators of the value add that's a little bit more intangible.
I like the tattoo stat, though.
The tattoo
I'm going to have to start doing a survey just on that.
A few months ago, Carl Schramm, the former CEO of Kauffman Foundation, wrote an interesting piece in the Harvard Business Review about how the number of small businesses have gone down the past few years, and while entrepreneurship education has gone up. So just kind of questioning the effectiveness of the field overall at some level and the importance of this tracking. And as we're talking about all these new models, there's also models that have been around for a long time in the field as well. And I was just curious, what in entrepreneurship education do you think doesn't work? And I was curious on your honest thoughts on that.
That's a cool question.
Yeah.
It's kind of a loaded question.
We're supposed to say that all the non-accelerators are terrible? Is that the goal?
I mean, there's something inherently fertilizing about it. I think getting more people exposure to it is important for the long-term. A bunch of the panels yesterday were talking about intrapreneurs, and I think that's also kind of interesting. I mean, I went to the University of Vermont, and we also have family business, which is kind of another side of entrepreneurship. But then there's also they were trying to teach intrapreneurial activities, because a lot of UVM people, especially in the business school, would go on to places like GE and other big corporates in finance. And so that wasn't my path necessarily. And I think more, for the people in the room, I think for administrators and people like that, can do more to foster excitement and enthusiasm for students, but also making them accountable for what they do. That's one thing that I noticed at school is as soon as I felt like I had something that was really deeply important to me and I was passionate about, which for me was starting the club basketball team and the entrepreneurship club, I was insanely more focused. I performed better because all of a sudden you have very little time to do classwork, so you kind of are forced to do more in a less amount of time, and I think that's very startup-y, and I'd like to try and see if there's more that we can do to get people to really feel like there's, I'm doing this, risking essentially everything, put it all on the line. And that's tough for a lot of people, but I think if you can get that commitment, I think you'll see that there'll be more successes and wins.
Yeah, what I love about the Accelerator model is that it is so focused on removing the barriers for someone getting a startup off the ground. I mean, there's a laser-like focus on that problem. It's, I love the Accelerator solution. It says, what, you need a place to have your office? Here, I'll give you free office space. What, you can't afford to quit your job? I'll pay you to start your business. What, you can't find customers? Let me introduce you to your first customers. It's what I love about accelerators is you take the hardest parts about starting a company up, and it tries its best to solve those problems. Now, it's a very specific bullet answer to a very specific question. So accelerators are probably not the right answer to extremely capital-intensive businesses that require you to build up stuff over several years with a lot of capital. It's not the answer to that problem, but for the very specific problem that it was invented to solve, which was getting these IT companies off the ground that don't require a ton of capital investment, it solves a ton of those problems right at the front end. So I love them as a solution for that. Now, there have been lots of different experiments that have been done to try to get them to solve problems in in the life sciences and biotech, and there have been lots of adaptations to the model. But man, when you look at it at its core target problem area, I can't imagine something working better than that.
To speak question, what's not going well in universities in terms of teaching entrepreneurship. I think Bill Cosby has a really good quote. He said, I don't know the key to success, but I know the key to failure, and it's trying to please everyone. And we oftentimes, entrepreneurs, anybody goes into decision paralysis if they have too many opinions, and we tell our entrepreneurs to only listen to those who have achieved the level of scale they want to achieve themselves. So for entrepreneurship programs at universities, the professor needs to be an entrepreneur. I think that's my biggest qualm with a lot of the classes is the professors are a lot of times academics who are teaching courses on entrepreneurship. And if there's anything we've learned from accelerators, you don't have teachers, you have mentors. And mentors are veteran entrepreneurs themselves. So I'd say get an entrepreneur in that classroom, teaching that classroom, and it makes a world of a difference.
Or just bring in entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I agree with that in terms of you have to actually, to be an entrepreneur, you actually have to do it. And the universities that are, and there aren't that many that are doing a great job, I have to say, because you can't teach entrepreneurship in a book. You can get an MBA, but that's not going to teach you to be, and that's fine. It's good, might be good skills, but it isn't going to teach you how to be an entrepreneur and really how to face the issues that you're going to face on the ground. You just have to get out and do it. And I know, I hate to say it, but I don't want to take other people's position on, but I am on the board of Babson, and Babson is one of those schools that you just have to go out and you have to create a company and you have to be a company, to graduate from the college. So I think it's really the only way you can really learn that.
I would just second that.
Yeah.
Don't do case studies. Project learning is much more important. Which is
Right.
Just go outside.
I just wanted to make a comment about the measuring of results, because it is hard. You have so many people that go through these incubator programs and stuff, and a lot of times I would gather that you kind of lose sight of them after a while. Some of them go off, you don't know exactly where they've gone. I'd be interested in your tracking, how you are attempting to track their performance, whether they stay with the company or the idea that they came into your incubators and so forth. Because at Springboard, we do track, we have results, but we're a little older, a later stage is what I mean, a more mature company. So out of 503 companies, 83% raised their capital. 80% are in business today over 12 years. They've raised $5.5 billion. Tens of thousands of jobs have been created, but they're a little more mature when we get them, so maybe a little easier to track. But I'd be interested in how you're trying to track, because I think that's also instructive as to how they change, mature, pivot, and many become serial entrepreneurs because you can't succeed on the first time around oftentimes, and we accept that here in our country. I was just wondering if you have tracking systems.
In progress for us. To be completely honest, the 21 months is an incredible learning experience for us ourselves. We're sort of new into this, and I come out of corporate America. My background is helping businesses grow and scale. So in some sense, this is my first startup as well. But we are learning and growing as we go. So every day, it's about doing what we do better. So from a tracking mechanism, it's okay, what information do we have ready now? All right, well, we're just starting to do our first surveys. We're just starting to follow up with companies more, but really what we're doing around that is creating very active alumni too. So much of what we're doing is bringing our alumni back and keep them actively engaged. And with those, we can get sort of real-time information. To be honest, we're not doing a great job right now of actually documenting it around some key metrics. But for us, what more important was just keeping them actively engaged in the community. So that's where our focus has been, but we're just starting to sort of evolve into the point where we'll have some good metrics.
Yeah, the first year that we did the rankings, we actually just got a bunch of grad students from Northwestern to just bang the phones and shoot emails to folks and have a little pre-canned Excel template that they were filling out for each one that they talked to. Since then, there's a great website, and if you guys haven't visited it, you definitely should. It's called seed-db.com. And on SeedDB, they do a really great job with great granularity tracking individual companies, going through individual accelerators. You can look at the performance of individual accelerators. You can look at companies as they progress through their funding rounds. It's a great, completely free resource. You should definitely look at it if you're interested in the space. And then something that we've been doing as a follow-on to track institutional funding rounds is we've been using the tool that's been available for decades now, which is Dow Jones Venture Source. And so that's something we've been using to track the institutional stuff.
So my name is Doug Mellinger, and I've been around the entrepreneurship education space for about 30 years. And I thought Michael's question was interesting. And the big difference, what I would say, you guys answered it perfectly about what's the accelerator's goal. Your goal is to graduate entrepreneurs. Or if they have a business when they first came to you, your goal is to accelerate those entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, the majority of the education programs that call themselves entrepreneurship education, the actual goal, and if you go on their websites, which I've been on a massive number of the websites, the goal is to study entrepreneurs. And so you will not find programs where the number one and really the only purpose that they should be in existence is to graduate entrepreneurs or accelerate entrepreneurs. Or I think the third goal could be to prepare the workforce for the entrepreneurial community. All three of those are acceptable. The goal of thinking that the programs are going to be graduating entrepreneurs, unfortunately, they're just not structured. Now, Babson, there's a handful of ones that are out there that are doing a much better job because they've incorporated much more experiential learning into the process, which is the only way. You know, when I was a computer science major, you know, every Thursday night I was up all night because I had to prepare a program for Friday morning. And if I'm an architecture major, I'm building models. But most entrepreneurship programs in this country, at best, have them do business plan competitions, which is just coming up with a conceptual framework they're not actually going through. And so until people start really taking the end goal, which is that you're trying to graduate or accelerate entrepreneurs and work backwards from that, the entrepreneurship programs are not going to succeed. The problem with the accelerators are that they're not going to a large enough scale in most cases. And so there's kind of that balance of, you know, how do you get much greater scale, you know, for this? And, you know, I think there's a tremendous opportunity if we can get that right.
Actually, I think one program that does a really interesting is Northeastern and their co-op program, which is pretty amazing. It's a 5-year program, and basically 1 year is dedicated to having students work in companies. And what's kind of interesting, like they even raised $300,000 to put co-op students at Northeastern into Mass Challenge companies. Like that's pretty awesome. And like I think Babson actually does a really good job of this too. Like Len Schlesinger has done like amazing things. Like if I would go to an MBA program, I'd probably be there. But he literally, like I think he spends time with the students, which I think is like really important. And showing that like senior people at your university or your program that you're working on are willing to engage, even at like, I don't mean lowest in a bad way, but just like willing to engage and spend time with students is like really important. And the fact that he helps like bring in, I think, like entrepreneurs in residence, I think that's pretty cool. Like Damon John, the founder of FUBU, is in EIR, which is, I think, pretty cool. And he spends times with companies, and you know, we have right now, I think, like 10 Babson companies at Mass Challenge. And what's amazing is they've also developed programs that actually fully align with the students that are developing companies. So they host like local angel groups on campus, right? They do other things that I think aren't even necessarily associated with the school, but they can just be supporting that community, which is inherently valuable for the students. And I think that's something, like you don't have to come up with everything on your own. I think one thing that I think good universities and programs do is bring in other people. I always say like outsource it. And that was our answer because we didn't have enough people working with us at the time, so we couldn't do everything. And so, you know, I think we're all saying is like bring in partners. You don't have to be the one to own it. And I think it's really important to like find ways to integrate your students, or for us, like it's like the finalists, right? Even at like the highest level, I'm trying to get them to pitch in front of like CEO lunches and things like that, because it's just good exposure, right? Like try not to own everything, like just get them opportunities to do cool stuff. That's good.
A quick plug. Derek was on the panel yesterday from Startup America. Phenomenal organization and doing some great stuff. So engage with Startup America. And you also heard from Microsoft and the BizSpark program. 2 great programs that are really helping entrepreneurs and young companies. So I would definitely engage with both programs.
I'm super curious on this panel because I heard a comment yesterday and it really got me thinking about something. Do you guys read 20-page business plans? No, I've never read one.
Never.
I just say that because when I took an entrepreneurship class in undergrad, they like teach you how to write this 20-page business plan. As a venture capitalist, I've never read one. And I don't think anyone here has. So just pointing that out.
Last question over here.
Mellinger lit a fuse that has kind of been underneath it. So I'm going to raise this and then you'll tell me to leave, okay? So Bruce, who's affiliated with the University of North Dakota, and who else is affiliated with the university? Raise your hand, okay? Here's the question, Doug. the universities cannot allow what you and I and others would like to do, and that is to have a kid not graduate. All right? And the entrepreneurial programs are set up, at least most of the 75 chancellors, presidents, and provosts that I've talked with don't allow me to have a conversation that says there's a chance that a bunch of your students are going to be highly successful entrepreneurs, but are never going to graduate or may not graduate in the 4-year timeline. And the problem, Doug, is those are the ones who they ought to be letting go and doing the greatest thing, because they come back and create chairs, departments, all kinds of giving. I think there's a conflict in the reality of where we are right now, for which higher education has an opportunity. And Bruce, I'm not picking on you because you run a great program and we love you, but I think that one of the realities is that chancellors, boards of regents, and governors want all these people to graduate, and so it's a butt in a chair for a fee that doesn't really allow you to actually become an entrepreneur under the academic umbrella. Now I'm going to sit down and shut up and watch the fire occur.
That's good. We want to have these kind of conversations and stir up the pot. So Melinda?
If I could just echo that comment, I'm pretty sure there's a picture of me somewhere at the University of Texas because of the number of people I've led to dropping out. You know the big. Yeah.
Well, that actually, interestingly enough, leads into my question. My name is Melinda Emerson. I'm a social media columnist with the New York Times, and I really am interested in what you guys' opinion is of Peter Thiel's program, where he will pay people $100,000 or $200,000 to drop out of school to launch a business. I think that it's interesting and scary, but I'm just really curious as to, you know, what you guys' opinion is of his program.
I think it depends totally on the person and the timing and everything like that. It's the same thing about entering a different accelerator program. Like, really, it depends on who you're talking to, what's important to them at the time. Is that the thing that I met one of his fellows at an event in Brown or something, and it really was actually probably the best decision that he could have made at the time, right? It was actually a great option. There was an amazing opportunity, and he could still go back to school. But at the same time, that's not a good fit for everyone. And the lure of 100, like I always say, I mentioned before, like the competition that we run, like the money that we give away is kind of like the lie that we tell the world to make everything else work. And I kind of see that a little bit in this money that he gives out, right? It's an incentive to get them to do what's really important, which may be like start their own business or write a book, or which is what this kid I met was doing. But you know, depending on where you are and what you're trying to do, it may or may not be a good thing. But
the answer is both.
Yeah.
You need an education, and you need to get out there and do it. So it's both. And is there a hybrid model that could work to make that happen? Maybe, I don't know. But the answer is both. You need an education, then you also need to get out there and actually do it.
I think Peter Thiel's program is awesome, but I think that it's for somebody who's maybe a standard deviation off the bell curve of what is common. And so he's giving permission to really unusually entrepreneurial people that, hey, you know, I can legitimatize you doing what you want to do now. And that's great for the fellows that they select. It's a little bit dangerous for everybody, but I think that it's really important that he's an instigator and he's pushing out that conversation and saying, is college worth the expense that it costs? And for some people, yes. And I would agree with him and say some people no. But it's a specific type of person.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the field and the focus that you want. Like, my wife is a nuclear medicine doctor. Man, I sure hope she finished med school before she started treating people.
All right, we have a question here from Steve Mariotti. Nifty.
I enjoyed the panel very much. I did want to just comment that at the high school level and junior high level, which is my craft for 32 years, writing a plan and having a child go through every aspect and then having them engage and start a small business, which is how the NIFTY program works, is really important. I certainly respect everything everybody's saying, and my hat's off to you. But I want to make sure that the message to high school and junior high and elementary children, particularly those in poverty, is plan, 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 because it's too expensive to make errors if you don't know your economics in one unit, your marketing, your budgets, and there's huge value in doing that. I also want to make a pitch, because the last 10 years, I hear often that reading and studying in business is something that should be done concurrently. And I've seen so many business failures. In fact, I'll argue today that the #1 cause of poverty in the world is actually business failure. Every village I've seen, every tragedy in a family, the government has tax issues. I can go on and on. I've seen it all. It's my craft. And the #1 cause of business failure is almost always somebody didn't know something. And the beauty of a literature review, whether it's online or textbook or however you want to call it, is you see one sentence about insurance, one sentence about contract, one sentence about your economics of one unit, one sentence about how to allocate your time, and that can save a family from poverty. So I want to make that great entrepreneurs are also great scholars of the field. It's as hard to sustain a business and to have a positive return on capital over a lifetime as it is to be a medical doctor specializing in knee surgery or whatever. So again, I salute you. I'm sure we're on the same page, but I want to clarify that with low-income people, particularly under the age of 18. Thanks, Michael.
Just to put it out there, I'd love to have a conversation with you because I'm not necessarily on the same page with that philosophy.
What do you think?
Oh, what do I think about that?
Yeah.
So I think the best way to learn is by doing, because I think you can read about it in a book in one sentence, but it doesn't stick unless it's really applied. I've seen this through my roommate. His name's Eric Glustrom, runs an organization called Educate, and it's over 2,200 schools in Uganda have adopted his curriculum. And so a lot of these people are in abject poverty. So $1 to $2 a day is what they're living with. And he's realized that planning is not a good source of education for these high school students, and that they really need to get out into their communities and solve problems, and then they'll be empowered to do that into the future. I've also seen programs in inner city schools where they're teaching students how to code. And I think that's incredibly powerful, much more powerful than how to plan. Because if you can code, you can create, and they're actually learning by building. So I'd say the pendulum always swings, and there's a spectrum, but I think that doing is incredibly important, and I would say more important than planning in a lot of ways.
I'm actually gonna just jump right on the back of that as well. I'm Susie Sosa. I'm at the University of Texas at Austin, and I teach social entrepreneurship there. And we've come to learn that entrepreneurship, or we believe that entrepreneurship is basically a muscle. And what you need to do, like any muscle, is flex it and practice it, and it will get stronger. And so in my courses, I see myself much more as a coach than as a sage philosopher. But of course, that to other faculty in the university puts in great question their value add. Because if all you're doing is coaching someone else to do the work, what's the value that you're contributing? So we do use written material as a way of aggregating what the students are doing out of the classroom. So go and talk to customers, go and do a prototype, write it up, bring it back, let's talk about it. But I just want to reinforce that it's a muscle that you have to practice and build. You can write up a workout, but until you get on the machines, you're not going to see any results.
Yeah, I mean, so if I could give a plug, I know Jonah Lehrer is in a lot of trouble right now for some, for plagiarism and a bunch of other stuff. But his original book, How We Decide, was like mind-altering for me, because it talks about the way people imprint memories and the way people internalize stuff. And basically, he makes the case for, hey, the way your brain is wired and the way your chemistry works, you don't really learn something until you really fail at it first. And then it really imprints really, really well in your brain. And so, man, I highly recommend that people just read that book, regardless of the baggage that it now comes with, because it's got some really, really great insights on that learning process.
I'm Gail Yeagle from the Young Entrepreneurs Academy, and the learning by doing piece, that's what we see. And to the gentleman who was talking about entrepreneurship programs that don't actually teach young people how to launch businesses, we do. We have a 30-week program that teach middle and high school not only how to launch businesses, but through the process they do launch businesses. They come up with the idea, they pitch the plan, get funding, and the plans are not 20 pages. They get funding, but they, most importantly, launch their business. And one of our students was selected to be one of the Teal Fellows that the Melinda brought up. He's Sujay Tile. He was contacted by Peter Thiel and asked to drop out of Harvard University. And his parents, he said, I won't do it without your permission, to his parents. And he said, I will go back eventually, but I want this opportunity. So Peter gave him $100,000 to drop out of Harvard. He was featured on 60 Minutes. He's out in California now starting an optics company with a small team. But he said that actually when he was in 9th grade, and started, his candy company called Spirited Sweets, the process of going through that launch and running that company for about 8 months, because then it wasn't cool with the young ladies in high school that he had a candy bar company, but he moved on to another venture. But it's that learning by doing, the actual launch, the using of that muscle, but there are programs out there, and we're one of them, so.
Great. I'm going to plug them really quickly. Actually, one of our finalists was actually, went through their program and is doing awesome stuff. So, called Strong Arm Technologies. Check it out.
Hi, I'm D.T. Ogilvy. I'm the Dean at Saunders College of Business at RIT. I was formerly at Rutgers. At Rutgers, we had a training program for entrepreneurs, which actually made an impressive and huge difference with those entrepreneurs' companies. Business owners and entrepreneurs. Some people have been in business 10 years, 20 years. So we trained them in quotes, the science of entrepreneurship. So I think there's a role for both. You have to have experience, and you have to have education. And if you combine the two together, then I think you up the odds of being successful. And I agree, you can't just learn it from a book. Can't really learn everything from a book, maybe a few things. But experience is very important. And I think any entrepreneurship program has to give students the opportunity, if we're talking about students, the chance to start a business and go through that whole process. At RIT, we have a student incubator, which won the award as the #1 or best incubator in the country for students. But those students actually are starting businesses. And we have some programs to provide capital, et cetera. And they are being mentored by entrepreneurs. So I think there's a role in universities, and it can be done successfully.
Oh, for sure. Like, there's so many university programs that I have. Oh, hook 'em. Yeah. So one of my favorite programs is One Semester Startup at the University of Texas at Austin. So if you're familiar with that, that's a great program. Newvention at Northwestern University, which brings together students from the law school, the med school, and the business school to take pieces of IP the university owns and commercialize them, is a great program. At Carnegie Mellon, the Entertainment Technology Center, that's the program that we pulled Game Salad out of. It was started by Randy Posh, the guy who gave the last lecture. That's an amazing program that forces students to do these semester-long projects that have to go out in the real world. I mean, there's some really amazing programs in universities. Pardon? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's some really, really amazing programs, and for me, the takeaway is it's an individual decision based off of an individual student who has to look at two factors. They have to look at what they need to know to execute in the field they want to go into. So I still want my doctors to go all the way through med school. But also, though, there are some people who are looking at market opportunities that are only open for 6 to 12 months. I mean, it was the right call for Michael Dell to drop out of UT and start Dell, because there was that window of time for him to get that company off the ground. And it's a very individual decision, and you really, really want to focus it. Yeah. Oh, there's a reason why the computer lab at the business school at UT is named after Michael Dell. I mean, he definitely got a lot out of that experience. And that's the other thing, right? I think the real takeaway is the right metric to measure these entrepreneurship programs is not their graduation rates. Because you have lots of dropouts that learned a ton in the program and then went on to do great things. There are other better metrics to measure.
So my name is Maya Durnovo. I'm the Dean of Workforce Development at Houston Community College, and I wanted to put a pitch in for community colleges. Yay! We do have a Center for Entrepreneurship that is open to anyone in the community that wants to come in, gain some skills, not necessarily a student, even though we do encourage them to take some basic courses because you do need the education, you do need the skills, but we are fostering entrepreneurship. And my role here is really to take it to the next level and really create an institute for small business development. So here for community colleges.
Yeah. Okay, last comments, last question over here. Jen.
Hi, Jennifer Kushel, Young and Successful Media. I'm a huge advocate of getting in the field and actually starting businesses as the most practical way to do it. I get it. I've been an entrepreneur since I was 13 years old, and I've trained thousands and thousands of young entrepreneurs, especially through Nifty. I have to make the point, though, that one of the biggest things that's lacking with our young people, and part of the reason I think we have this global education crisis and global economic and unemployment crisis, is because young people have a fundamental lack of financial and business literacy. That is something that we ignore, from the poorest kids in the world to the wealthiest kids in the world. Many times, if their families are not in business and they're not surrounded by business, they don't get it. So in Nifty classes, I've been teaching Nifty since I was 19 and I met Steve. This is unbelievable. We don't understand the poverty that these kids who live among us live in. For kids who come literally off the streets, out of foster care, out of homelessness, into classrooms, the basic fundamentals of teaching them business literacy, what marketing means, what sales means, what it means to be an entrepreneur. We have to start at that level to say, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? We have to sit in a room and say, who made that glass? Who made that table? Who delivered the tablecloth? That's a conversation we don't even have with kids, but it's not limited to inner city and disadvantaged kids. I speak at Harvard all the time, and I do their career leadership, career exploration programs. I answer questions for 4 hours after I speak, because kids come up to me and say, you know, I have this business idea, but it's a dirty word at Harvard. It's in a lot of academic institutions who are our most successful in the world. Business is a dirty word. It's not until they go and they get an MBA or go to graduate school that it becomes legitimate. Entrepreneur is a dirty word. Kids at Harvard don't want to study marketing because they don't like sales. There's a real big problem about that. And I think part of the reason the kids are not finding jobs is because they don't understand how businesses work. They say, I want to work for this company. What division? I have no idea. What do you want to do? I don't know. What kind of role do you want to play? I have no idea. We're just not teaching business, and we're not teaching opportunity recognition. And I think those are the two most important things we need to be teaching. If we teach entrepreneurship, they can create jobs and opportunity anywhere they go, and they'll be better employees. But I think there has to be a strong, message that educating on business is critical.
Yeah. I think sales is pretty crucial, though, too.
Yeah. Can I just reiterate how awesome of a program Nifty is? I spent some time volunteering with Nifty back when I lived in Chicago, and I mean, it's amazing kind of what happens when you start opening up folks' eyes to the economics of how stuff gets to where it belongs. It's like if any of you guys have ever thought about spending time with an organization, I highly recommend Nifty. It's amazing.